Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar. It is entitled The Rise of the Data Hub, Strategies for Effective Convergence of Data Management and Governance. Today, we have two speakers for you to enjoy. Our first speaker is Kevin Petrie, our Vice President of Research at Eckerson Group. Kevin is a veteran in the industry. For the last 25 years, Kevin has been deciphering what technology means to practitioners as an industry analyst, writer, instructor, marketer, and services leader. Kevin launched, built, and led a profitable data services team for EMC Pivotal in the Americas and EMEA, and ran field training at the data integration software provider Attunity, now part of Click. Kevin is a frequent public speaker and co-author of 2 books on data streaming. Kevin is also a data management instructor at eLearning Curve. Our guest speaker is Matt Dahlman, our VP of Customer Service at Semarkey. Matt is responsible for the success of Semarkey's customers and partners worldwide. Matt formerly served as Technical Director for Business Development at Jaspersoft, now Tibco, where he oversaw development of the most popular business intelligence offering on the Amazon Web Services marketplace. Previously, he was Technical Director of Asia Pacific, overseeing professional services, support, and pre-sales for Synopsys. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Eckerson Group if you don't know us that well. Eckerson Group is a research and consulting firm that specializes in data analytics. Hopefully you've read some of our articles and reports, but if you haven't, please visit eckerson.com to learn much more about us. We perform quite a bit of research, and we also have a consulting arm. Kevin, please take it away.
Great. So really pleased to have the opportunity to speak with folks today. I've been working with Semarkey on some blogs related to this topic, and I think it's a fascinating opportunity for enterprises that presents some tricky and in some ways new questions. Technology convergence is a common theme in many aspects of data management and analytics, but it always presents interesting trade-offs and interesting decision points for enterprises. So we're looking forward to exploring that here. So if we go to the next slide, I think we had a quick slide on our bio, and Sterling walked through our backgrounds. We can go to the next one. So the agenda here, what I'm going to do is talk about the problem of data silos, something that I'm guessing everyone on this call knows from firsthand experience. And I'll talk about what the specific issue and the symptoms are that might point to a data hub approach. Then we'll talk about the vision of what the data hub is, the upside case, if you will, and we'll explore how that really starts to reinvent roles of business managers, of BI analysts in some intriguing ways. That introduces trade-offs and evaluation criteria for a potential data hub solution, and it also introduces the need for some real guiding principles that can help create rub rails, guidelines, lines on the road to follow as you're moving on a journey, provided you've decided to move to a data hub. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, the obligatory graphic of corn silos. As we can see, there is space between these silos. You have a lot of green that has value, and they are siloed. As we know, in good times, data silos can cause problems. Right now, we're in turbulent times, maybe hopeful times, maybe bad times, but not to get too Dickensian on this, but we're in very uncertain times. And that's when data silos become a serious problem, because in the wake of COVID-19, one long-term trend and medium-term trend is that things we knew in 2018 just don't matter as much. You need fresh data, and you need to bring it together, and you need to bring together new types of data in a very quick way. So without integrated data, retailers that are struggling cannot predict customer choices about in-store shopping. Manufacturers need to plug holes in their supply chain, and healthcare providers need to adopt some new practices to design COVID-19 resistant operations. So the data silo problem can create some real issues, and the symptoms that indicate you might be suffering from this and at the point of needing remediation is that your IT organization spends more time integrating tools than it does integrating data. lines of business can have different tools, different favorites in terms of assembling data and analyzing it within their fiefdoms. And IT needs to spend time reconciling those so that you can try to have a consistent source of truth. Teams can work at cross purposes in this way and in other ways. You can have organizations that are delivering time-sensitive, fast-track reports to the CEO on a certain topic. Given the time constraints, given the need to get things done quickly, they optimize that path of work and end up creating formats of data, reporting formats, and so forth that are at cross purposes with other parts of the organization. And so what this means is that the data steward, who really is ideally the watchdog, the guardian of data governance policies, and the implementer and the enforcer of data policies, what they end up doing is chasing issues. And so those are all some of the symptoms that relate to data governance, that relate to data management, that are caused by data silos. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, the data hub is a term that gets used in a number of different contexts. And what I'm going to do is define the hub as a platform that enables business managers and BI analysts to take a more proactive role in data management and data governance. And it's a very interesting proposition because you have the idea of self-service, which for a while has empowered exactly these people, or sought to empower the business manager and the BI analyst, to start to assemble data for themselves in order to meet their own requirements, which is get answers to business problems fast and drive data into their decisions. So business managers and BI analysts have every interest in participating in traditional self-service. But now what the Data Hub does is say, okay, we'd actually like your help as the domain expert on this data and what it says to help us with governance too. And that's kind of like asking your kids all to eat their vegetables because they don't quite want to. They know it's right. They know it's right for the team. But so you need to do it very well. And you need to have a very intuitive interface. I'm looking forward, and I think all of us will, to what Matt's going to walk through in terms of what this looks like in live action. But the idea of turning business managers and BI analysts into part-time data governors and part-time data managers is intriguing and can be really groundbreaking if you do it well. The idea here is that they will start to integrate, refine, and explore data themselves. They'll help build 360-degree views of customers, employees, suppliers, et cetera, and they can contribute to 360-degree views of those entities, even if they don't directly need them, because they are actually contributing to a central effort, a collective effort, in terms of creating governed views. And so they're going to rely on a platform, a technology platform that glues together the notion of governance, master data management, and data quality. So that's the vision. And as we've said, it's an ambitious vision, and it requires, I think, real careful calibration of how to do things well. So if we look at what the business manager is doing in this new world, they're going to be applying their domain expertise to data exploration, to data assembly, transformation for reporting and analytics, and formatting as well. And when we say analytics here, we're generally talking about business intelligence more than advanced data science. We certainly want to be compatible with that, but this boils down to the increasingly time-sensitive set of reporting, business intelligence, and reporting requirements that you need to run your business, which you need to run the functions within different business units. The business manager understands the subject matter better than anyone. And therefore, if you give them an intuitive tool, they can start to use that domain expertise to actually create sources of truth for the rest of the business to use in a repeatable way, in a repeatable, governed way. And so they can actually, if it's an intuitive system, identify gaps in master data, help match and merge records themselves. And they can help visualize and govern relationships between different entities. And Matt's going to show you some of this if you go the Samarkey route. So if we move to the next slide, the other side of the house here are the BI analysts. Now, BI analyst folks obviously exist throughout lines of business. Some exist within central IT, but generally we're talking about line of business focus in this context. And they're going to gain new confidence in the quality of the data because they're one step removed as domain experts. But because they've enlisted the business managers, they can start to have trust in accuracy of the data because they didn't just ask business managers, is this data correct? And if so, how does it need to be fixed? They actually had the business managers help fix that data. The BI analysts also can improve efficiency by reducing the manual labor and the overall amount of labor required to transform and prepare data for reporting and for analytics. And it frees them up to do more detective work, spending more time on exploration and discovery. So this is a pretty intriguing opportunity. You've got the BI analysts that are data hounds. Because they're playing firefighter less, they're now able to innovate more. And so you're empowering the eyes and the ears throughout the business units to start to spend more time on that because they have the confidence that the data they're working with has a higher level of governance. So we can go to the next slide. So in a nutshell, what's the impact on the data steward? The data steward is the frontline individual charged with making sure that data is governed. They're charged with ideally implementing policies and instituting policies as it relates to how data should be governed, how data should be managed in a governed way. And the prior silo scenario I painted had been largely playing the role of firefighter, going into burning buildings, metaphorically, to clean up messes that have been made because of individual fast-tracked projects to meet different executive inquiries, to meet different strategic requirements, to try to band-aid together different acquired business units. And so the data steward had been running around trying to figure out how to reconcile things and patch them together enough that a large organization could, in a compliant way, actually report on quarterly earnings for a new acquired business unit. That's just one of many examples. So that's what this data steward used to be and still is at many organizations. If we go to the next slide, we can see that they're now going to play more of a strategic role, helping create policy, create legislation, if you will, in our analogy. It's because they can move up the ladder a little bit. They're spending less time firefighting, and now they can start to say, okay, what do the rules we have really make sense? I have confidence that when I institute them now, because we're working with this combined platform and we're engaging the domain experts, we think that the data will in fact be assembled in a very governable and reusable way. Now I can take a more strategic role as the data steward, work with the chief data officer, work with other compliance officers to make sure that we're looking around the corner to understand the downstream implications of, for example, the California Data Protection Privacy Act, and obviously GDPR, which has been in effect for a few years now in Europe, that still has some ripple effects coming into the U.S. And there are other state pieces of legislation as well that come up related to personally identifiable information. But they can start to take a more strategic and proactive and far-sighted view of how to comply with those and how to govern their data. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So that's the vision. That is the view of current dystopia and future utopia. And reality is always somewhere in between. And so we can start to assess how can we make this work for your enterprise and what would it actually look like when we do. And as we work through this, I defined three fundamental trade-offs, which in a lot of ways apply to a lot of other technologies too. They apply to a lot of technologies and a lot of converging technologies, especially in data and analytics as a discipline. The first trade-off is the ease of the new tool versus learning and adoption. One of the things that I advise consulting clients on is that a shiny new object, a shiny new tool that's really easy to use will reduce your workload, but it will reduce it minus the amount of time you need to take to learn it. And so there's going to be a learning curve. You have to budget for that, and you have to make sure that you're taking the right amount of time and you're budgeting for that amount of time to have the individuals in your organization use it correctly. Because even if you've got a great data hub solution and you're putting it into place, if people start to use shortcuts in using it, it's not a step forward, because you're creating silos and you're creating multiple data copies that are unnecessary and so forth. So the key question is, does the data hub reduce overall administrative work? And does it justify the amount of training required? What are the training requirements? Two related questions are, does it reduce overall administrative work or redistribute it? So if you recall, we're asking new things of BI analysts and data managers. We're asking them to take a bigger role in data governance and do new things with that to help actually manage MDM and so forth. Those are things that they might not have been very involved in the past. So you need to make sure that there's a net benefit to the organization if you redistribute that work. The related question as well is, can the data hub enable organizations to retire other tools for simplicity? This view of convergence works, but if you don't retire some of your other stuff, you're still increasing overall administrative burden. Second trade-off it's a closely related factor, which is the benefits of reinventing, of getting to a new steady state versus the cost of disruption to get there. And basic concept, can you implement the data hub in a do no harm fashion? And it matters in this case. It matters in any case when you're dealing with data in 2020, but it matters in particular in this case because you're talking about governance. You really can't interrupt your existing governance and compliance posture. Senators who are inquiring about how data is used, because they don't want to hear about the technology transition creating some bumbling of PII. It's not acceptable. So you need to make sure you're doing no harm. Another thing is you need to make sure that you can align with strategic initiatives related to compliance. Compliance is a moving target, related to data modernization or cloud efforts, because that actually helps. That helps distribute things, or I should say helps reduce disruption. If you've got migration to the cloud that's taking place, it's budgeted for, it's a way to start to simplify and consolidate onto a single platform. Layer your data hub onto that, attached to that project, so you're helping streamline further. And there's obviously the question, always look at the alternative. Should I implement this new data hub, retire 3 old tools, or is there value, at least for the next 3 years, potentially in reconfiguring or consolidating the tools I have and know already? Important to ask those questions. The final trade-off here is considering the efficiency of one framework versus the need to specialize. I think we all favor the view of a single master dashboard of any type that can start to address a large heterogeneous environment and give you a single point of control. That's a great nirvana to achieve, but there's a simple fact that there's always a role for customization. And this is something we've written about in research in a lot of different contexts, but you need to make sure that you're not leaving critical so-called corner cases unaddressed if those happen to generate a lot of revenue. So it's important to, as you move to a data hub, if you decide it's the right thing for you, to maintain an open architecture so that your data formats, you have open APIs, you can accommodate additional technologies, and you can grow over time because it will be protean, to add or change third-party components so that you can accommodate those sets of corner cases that always appear related to customization. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So I gave you a meaty slide, and now we're going to thin it out a little bit. You can listen to me and read less. I've come up with 4 guiding principles. The criteria, we talked about the vision. We talked about evaluation criteria to decide, is this right for me? Let's say you've decided it's right for you. Now you want to think, how do I get from here to there? And how do I do it in a way that's sustainable and going to meet objectives? The first consideration is really to secure C-level sponsorship. True of any technology endeavor. The chief analytics officer or the chief data officer, often those titles are used interchangeably, is going to play a big role because they are charged with guiding usage of data, consumption of data throughout the business units, and they serve as a liaison back to IT to help them articulate, help them understand the needs of all these data consumers, the BI analysts, the business managers, and so forth. And so it's absolutely critical. If you're going to roll out something as ambitious as a data hub, you need to make sure they're signed on to it, budget-wise, organizationally, that they're ready to take a hard look at what types of roles are needed to lead this effort, what types of training and incentives are required to make sure that it's actually adopted. So that's a critical piece, and one that I really can't overemphasize. Certainly true of other types of technologies. The second guiding principle here, and forgive the cute kid picture pulled from my stock, is to attach what you're doing to funded projects. It's important that you not try to complicate the C-level discussion to the degree you have to by asking for money in a vacuum. The more you can piggyback funded initiatives, many of which have accelerated in the wake of the COVID shock march onward, you can put it in a frame of reference that executives get and are paying for. So that would include cloud migration, that would include data modernization, that would include data democratization. Those are the types of terms and concepts that are floated at the C-level to help organizations get much more data-driven and much more virtual as a method of survival, of innovation, of reinvention, which is absolutely critical in 2020 more than in prior years. The next guiding principle here is to federate your analysts. And I'll spend a little bit of time on this because this isn't necessarily a must-have for every organization, but it gets to a fundamental problem and the fundamental tension that exists in every organization. Wayne Eckerson and others have explored this in great detail, the concept of governed self-service. How do you give people just enough freedom to be innovative, to get their jobs done, and to come up with new ways to keep adding more value to their organizations throughout the lines of business? How do you get those analysts supercharged and super empowered, but do it in a way that doesn't create a mess for IT to go back and clean up? And so the Data Hub can help a lot from a technology perspective, but there are people considerations here. Talked about the need for C-level support. Another critical piece here is consider a federated model, and we're implementing this with a few consultant clients right now. You've got, we're doing this with, for example, the company dealing with a lot of hospitals, with a major university, and it's a common theme really across verticals, which is that you need to empower the analysts within the line of business, but you need to give them, at least on a dotted line basis, ties back to a central governed program in the form of the data analytics team and the policies they're going to administer. So the Federated Center of Excellence is exactly that concept. They're going to govern data, they're going to set policies, and they're going to create an education plan that will be formally administered by enterprise IT, by the Federated Center of Excellence throughout the business units. But you'll also have analytics user groups, which will enable people to come together, birds of a feather sessions. Obviously, this is more of a virtual format these days. But if they have a particular interest in data warehouse reporting, in using the new enterprise data lake, or using common tools, those are just different ways in which they might come together and share best practices. Sharing best practices so they can collectively think creatively and teach one another about how to do their jobs, innovate, and still contribute to rather than diminish central governance. So we found this model to be pretty effective because it's non-disruptive. You're not reorganizing. You're creating a dotted line, not a hard line. You have a stick, which is governance. You have a carrot, which is education in the form of the user group. And it's a way to get people on the same page. Absolutely critical to think about things like this if you can strike that, in order to strike the right balance between self-service and governance. We can go to guiding principle 4. Okay, basic image here. As with many technology initiatives, and I say this often in a lot of different contexts, start with a small win. We're talking about an ambitious redefinition of how you're enterprise governs data, that's a big deal. And the only way it's going to get out of the first inning, out of the first quarter in the football analogy, is to get yourself a quick win. And so that, in my view, means defining important but not absolutely critical data sets that are relatively small. There's some latency tolerance. It's relatively high profile. It's of interest to power users who are willing to roll up their sleeves and give things a try. They like trying new things and they like evangelizing to their peers. Those are the characteristics of your first project in this data hub initiative, because those characteristics will help you define how you can execute something, a rollout. Maybe you're only rolling it out to 1 or 2 business units, but you're putting the core central model in place. And then once you demonstrate a win there, once you demonstrate results in the terms of efficiency and in terms of potentially contributing to revenue generating activities, you can start to take on project number 2 and project number 3 and so forth, and thereby expand the data hub footprint in your organization. So those are the considerations that I wanted to walk through with folks here. We spend a lot of time talking to enterprises about how to approach emerging disciplines such as the data hub. We spend a lot of time writing about that and working with vendors to help them articulate their stories and kind of help customers that they work with put that story against the hard light of reality and kind of size up the trade-offs. And I hope this was useful. I think what I'm going to do now is hand back over to Matt, and he's going to roll up his sleeves and show you more about what some of the data hub stories look like in practice. And quickly here, we do, as I said, do a lot of consulting. So this is just a sample of some of the clients that we've worked with.
Hey, perfect. Thank you, Kevin. And this is Matt coming back, and absolutely that set the stage, I think, with some of the strategic considerations for dealing with the silos and putting data together into a data hub. And so I'll now be the guide for folks to take a look at. In a sense, you could think of it as more of a tactical part of the whole overall strategic solution. And let's look at Samarkey and what the product offering is. So I'm going to walk folks through an introduction to that today and see how it fits into the overall story that you were building there. Hey, first, let me talk to a little vocabulary to set the stage here. I'm not going to spend long on the company or really long on talking about the product, and I'll spend more time demonstrating it. I've got just 4 slides here to talk about, but this will give a little bit of context. So, hey, for pure vocabulary, the company is Samarkey. We've been in the data management business for about 10 years. The product is we call it XDM. The idea of the X is really to try to convey succinctly this idea that, hey, traditionally you might call it MDM, right? Master data management, and we're proud to be in that space. But then, other times folks are using us more for reference data management, RDM. Sometimes it's more of the application, sharing key information between applications. We start to get that ADM acronym, and our point was to express, hey, this is a data hub. The type of data being managed can be anything. So X is supposed to just be a stand-in and let you know, hey, this is what we think, this is what we're good at, building this hub and being able to manage your data. And so the things that you're going to see out of the product are going to be just as a few examples. If we look at it in the positive way, hey, we're blending the data together, standardizing what you've got for consistency, and maybe enhancing, pulling data from other sources, working on it. These are the nice positive way to think about the benefits you're getting. If I could indulge in the negative way of thinking about it for a moment, what that means is you've got to blend data because you've got it in silos, and you need a way to bring it together and get the full benefit. And so that's a lot of times what folks are trying to achieve with this platform is bringing those data out of those different silos. Lots of details go in there, making sure that the quality is what it needs to be. It's cetera. But lots of those details go into getting the silos themselves working well, and then bringing them together, and then really having the data in a single hub. That's going to be the vision for most of these projects. And so that's what we'll be looking at here is how to have consolidate data from different sources, bring it together. It's a top use case. As far as the platform itself, to enable the intelligent data hub, there are a bunch of pieces under the covers that we've got that, say that the team putting together the solution is going to become very familiar with. I'm not going to speak very much to those today. So for the moment, it's enough to know that those exist. There's going to be a module to write dashboards and automatically generating APIs and things like this. That'll be a session for another day for folks who are more interested to drill into those details. And believe me, I'm on sort of the geeky side of things with our product offering, and I'm pleased to discuss those things in more detail. But for today, the focus is really what comes of that, what goes around that. We're going to talk about these business-ready applications that are really given these sort of data stewards or business, sort of the folks with the actual business expertise, giving them a window into their data to know that they've got a standard place to go to it and a simple way to fix it, and to really govern what they've got in there. So it's these generated applications. To be clear, these are not canned, pre-built applications. I wouldn't want you to go away with that idea, but rather these get generated based on the model that you configure in Semarchy. So one Semarchy customer is going to have maybe a B to C kind of working with consumers model and expose a fair bit of functionality in that. And another customer may do B to C, but look at it in a different way. Their rules on householding are different, and they're doing it quite differently, or they're doing a whole domain entirely different. They're working with their products or reference data or things like that. And so the key message in this case is that you understand that Semarchy is going to generate those applications, those business-ready applications, and they're going to be based on the rules and the model that you configure in the tool, and those get generated out of that. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today, a few examples of these applications generated out of the tool. Okay, and now I think of there as being two main ways to look at the platform and to decide if this is an interesting technology. And so some folks, for the specific cases that you've got, and some will come into it thinking, hey, I'm in a particular industry. How does XDM apply to finance? And we've got problems. We want to manage the business entities that we're working with, the legal entities or the counterparties that we're dealing with. And that's a super common use case. And we've got hedge funds managing products like at Varde, or more traditional banks and finance folks, PIMCO managing financial advisors, or Goldman Sachs managing the companies that they're doing business with. So you've got all of these sort of vertical focused this sort of view of the technology through this vertical lens, and that's perfectly appropriate. Some are looking at insurance and finance, some are looking at healthcare, and or you see some of the examples here, and so that is that's great. That's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is horizontal. So depending for the different folks in the audience, what they're coming to this presentation, what's going to be important to them in the short term. Maybe it's more vertical. We've got a retail problem. We want to solve it the same way that Bose and Red Wing Shoes and Billabong have. Great, but maybe it's more of a horizontal. Saying, hey, we've got these GDPR and CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, things that Kevin mentioned earlier, that would be driving some of the initial work we want to do. So great, that might be it. And those are very much a horizontal focus. It could be, I don't want to call it boring reference data, but there's some pretty standard reference data problems that people run into, and the tool's great for that. Sometimes the reference data can be that perfect example of the quick win, again, that Kevin was speaking to, where we've got it's internal reference data, it's different, say, product codes or customer codes or things that we want to make sure we're using in our different applications consistently. That can be a perfect quick win for folks to bring this in-house and not try to solve everything at once, but to get something that is high visibility and get it rolled out. But there can be other things. These are just examples. Still with the horizontal focus, it can be things like your employees, human resources problems. Everybody's got employees. Everybody's got these sort of things to sort out. And you've got employee data in a bunch of different places. Bringing those together can be one of the early wins where you're like, hey, we don't want to point it out to customer data or products are pretty well managed in a PIM, but we got to deal with some other types of data in the hub. So I urge you to think about this through whichever lens is appropriate for your case, and notice that both ways are reasonable ways to think about the technology and think how it might apply. Okay, with that said, this is really my last slide, and we're going to move over to the good part and actually see how the product is working. And so just drawing your attention here to the fact that master data management is really the core of why the company was established and the technology that we built. But that doesn't operate in isolation by any means. And so there's going to be lots of questions. Today we'll talk more about data governance as that interacts with MDM. But other times your focus is more on the data catalog or data quality or really other pieces of your data management. So just drawing your attention here to how we see really this is a key piece that is central but fits in with lots of other parts of your data management strategy. Okay, so with that, let me shift over to showing my browser, and we're going to take a look at the product in action. Okay, so I mentioned, you saw in the slides, there are these underlying pieces that are what make up the Semarkey XDM platform, the application builder and the dashboard builder and backend APIs and things like this. As promised, today is not the day we're going to explore those in more detail. In fact, I'm going to focus in on a couple examples of the front-end application. So let's start in here with our generic intelligent data hub. And let me walk you through what you're seeing here. It's a new environment. The key idea, the overarching idea is that we wanted this to be simple and familiar. So you're going to find there are a lot of different use cases that get handled. Sometimes it's more data creation. Sometimes it's more consolidation of data from different systems. Those are all going to be in a very consistent environment. And so let me walk you through some of the examples that we've got here in this example. Now, of course, the caveat is that every different Semarkey implementation is going to be different. You're going to see different data domains being addressed and different use cases. So they're going to vary a significant amount, but there are some standard things that are going to apply throughout. So here we're seeing an example of a business to consumer, a B2C kind of use case. And let's drill into one of the customers that we're seeing here and see what's going on. What is the data that's in the hub here? So in this case, we're gathering up data about individual people. You can see we're bringing together phone and email and address, some standard stuff. It's some of you your eyes going to jump to like privileged information like, hey, birth date and social security number and things like this. Quick reminder that you've got full control in a practical sense about what data is available. Here we see over on the right-hand side, like in the notes, hey, date of birth, we've got security controls around that. So it needs to be in the hub because it's core information. But depending on your role, you might or you might not have access to see that data. And if you don't, it's just going to show up as a masked value. And if you do, then you've got it. And so your data compliance team has got full access to control who has access to what. Likewise, I'll draw your attention to some of the things I would say are a little bit less traditional, but can be super helpful. Like here, seeing access to more transactional results, like the purchase history of a customer. That's not really master data management. That's not master data in a traditional definition, right? It's the customer itself. Sure, Cali, Aldaba, that's definitely classic master data. But seeing purchase history can be super interesting for a data steward to be able to determine some information about this customer. And so this is what our dashboards bring to it. So you got this embedded information right in here that can really complement other things you've got. And then other examples still here as we're just sort of browsing through the data that we're seeing. Tracking things like communication preferences is a super common use of the platform. Say like here you see, for example, Callie has opted in to in-person, like to actual physical mailings and to emails, and those are fine. But phone calls are out, and she's opted out of this. And so this is a tool providing a central place to manage that. You're seeing the history of what she's done before. And these actual preferences are then probably coming in from the front-end web-facing application where she's doing some self-service. But they might also be feeding in from the help desk when she's called in there to deal with something. They can send it in. And so those systems themselves stay separate, but the data from them flows into the data hub, and then it can track all this for you. So you've got it in one place for, really for efficiency, to give a better customer experience, but also for compliance for a bunch of reasons. And then, we mentioned earlier, you're able to track sort of less traditional master data, things like more transactional stuff. This, in some cases, it's appropriate. In some cases, not relevant. You're just going to leave it over in another system, just drawing attention to the flexibility with that. And then really tying it back to the data silos, and the problem that really initiated some of this work is, let's look back at where is this data coming from? Now, in this case, it's a nice simple example where she exists in two different systems. She's maybe they're using Salesforce as the CRM, and there's a version of her information there. There's a marketing platform where they're maybe sending out the emails, and they've both got separate definitions of the customer. And here we're going to be tracking their IDs in the different systems, bringing them together to form a golden version of the truth. Here you can see there's some level of inconsistency. The address wasn't quite the same between them, and we can see this blue value is the one that survived into the golden record. But this is just drawing attention to how we're tracking all the data and then consolidating it into one spot here. Okay, so enough of browsing into this example. Let's take a look at performing some of the work that we wanted to do to take full advantage, and that's going to be things like the example Kevin gave was working with the duplicates. And here you can see the tool has suggested a bunch of matches. I'm going to go in, put on the role of that, sort of that business manager who's going to got this subject area expertise. We sometimes refer to these as data champions, folks who know the data and given the right platform can really take full control and make sure that folks are getting good data. I'm going to grab two examples just to sort of set the stage. Let's grab Lois and Antonia. Of course, realistically, if this is my job, I'm probably going to go through and make sure to clear out my inbox of all the work that's here for me. But in this case, let's just do a couple of examples so you get to see them. So I'm going to review the suggestions. So to be clear, these are suggestions from the tool. And the idea is that these are cases that couldn't be automated. They're going to take some human brain power to think about. So the first one, Lois comes up right now. So right now in the MDM, there's these two different golden records. There's Lewis Kyle and Lois Kyle. And the tool has said, these might be the same person. Go take a look. As this, business manager role, I'm going in here and saying, all right, are these the same person? They've got a very similar name, but as I look through, like, hey, they have different emails. They have the same address. Oh, I'm not sure. They have different dates of birth. So after a little bit, if I jump ahead to the answer, I'm going to realize, you know what? These are just two different people. It's a married couple. The names are similar, and that's why the tool thought they might be the same. But I'm going to say, no, reject this suggestion. The way things are in the MDM, right now in the Data Hub are correct. So we're going to leave it that way. And then I'll compare it with this next one, a little bit more complicated. And in fact, hey, from a purely visual standpoint, this might be a case where I know from feedback from different customers that we work with, some folks are really visually oriented. They're like, we love this graph view of the data. This is how we want to see it. It makes it intuitive to me. And other folks go, Matt, I hate that. I need I'm used to Excel. I need my tables. And so you've got either one. Here I'm going to switch over to a table view of exactly the same data, like precisely the same data, but presented differently. And here we're going to embark on a similar sort of investigation. Hey, are these the same person? Are they different? The tool thought they might be the same. Antonia and Tony. We're going to take a little bit longer to review and figure out, well, they're different addresses. They're in the same city. If we keep going through, we're going to see things like, you know what? She's got the same phone number, same last name. This, again, with a little bit more, I'm jumping to the end, but with a little more investigation, we're going to realize the reason it's an edge case, the reason they didn't just match automatically, most of our records were just automatic. We're happy with the match, and it never got reviewed. It was confirmed automatically. In this case, someone messed up the date of birth. We ended up, you can see 7/1, July 1st, somehow became 7/1, January 7th, 1/7. Like, that's why they didn't automatically merge, but really they should have. And this represents a single person. So the tool was confident enough in these three going together and confident enough in these three going together. But I'm going to say, yeah, let's accept this. The tool did a good job. We're going to end up with a single golden record in this case and bringing them together. Okay, now, I do want to draw your attention to the fact that for certain use cases, you'd be like, whoa, this is over the top. We got 1 million B2C customers. We're not going to review these manually. And some of our customers don't do any of the manual review. They stick with match rules that are conservative, that they trust, and they'll configure the rules they want and then make it 100% automated. Others, maybe for just their high value customers, are going to review and make sure the matches are correct. So you're going to own those sort of policy decisions. But the key point is that you're able to set those up the way that you'd want. Now, let me show one quick example. I'm going to run over my demo time pretty soon here, so I'm going to be careful not to go too far. But I do want to just make the point that we've got wild use cases all handled within here. And so here, if I look just for a moment at a more of a B2B use case where we're dealing with companies instead of consumers. And so here you're going to have things like the hierarchies. So maybe folks know that Alphabet is the holding company that owns Google, but really maybe Google is the customer that I care about at the moment. So I'm going to go down through this hierarchy to look at this one or other companies they've acquired. So you got this sort of hierarchy management. Likewise, you've got some of the sort of the governance and data dictionary things that we haven't looked at yet. I've asserted that we have some of that. We haven't seen it. So let me head off to that for just a moment. And here, as I look at this customer, and I'm saying, all right, they've got certain revenue, $44 billion in revenue. What is our agreed definition of revenue at the company? And you've got right in the sidebar here, you've got your metadata telling you about how these, what these business terms are. But we can actually follow the link over to the governance application, the governance side of things, where we're looking at. So in this case, we've taken just sort of what makes me is on the geeky side happy that you've got your URL linking you straight to the thing that you care about, straight to the revenue business term in this case. But more generally, if we're looking at our business glossary, we've got business terms in a bunch of different domains. Here, I'm going to grab one of the domains that I'm familiar with on the sales and marketing side, and we can start to browse through these things rather than going straight into that, that particular business term. And here we're getting into some of the more governance-oriented things where we're defining the policies and defining the rules that we want to be able to share. So not so much data focused, although it'll tie into that for sure. But coming up with our pure definitions of, hey, what is a prospect when we're doing things here? How do we define a prospect versus a customer? We've got a process for defining that and making sure we've got a consistent place for it. Or for our different policies, like, hey, how are we defining Well, here's an example for the invoice number assignment. When we actually generate invoice numbers, here's the rule. We've documented in one central place. Invoices get generated like this. There's going to be a separate effort on the IT side for making sure that the application that's generating the invoices is agreeing with that. But here we've got it a centralized place. It's gone through an approval workflow, and we know what it is, and now everyone knows what to expect. So you've got this sort of governance-focused things that really tie straight into the master data management itself. And here, really, the last thing that I'm going to show before we pause and open up to some of the questions that folks have got is just to remind folks that here we've been focused on consolidating data from heterogeneous different systems, but you've also got some of the same problems being solved by, in a centralized place, creating records in the hub. So here we're doing like trousers by truckers. It's going to be my new product. I'm going to have this request for creating a new product. The tool's going to guide me through this, give me a centralized place to do it, give me data quality warnings like, hey, these are the values that have to be filled in. Let's make sure we get it correctly entered. This is going to be some classic trousers. I'm going to leave that to the marketing folks to give us an actual good description. So here, think of this as just my request to create a new product. Again, your actual workflow for creation is going to be different in all its details, but the mechanism is going to be the same where, hey, we've got this workflow. When I'm done with my request, it's going to go over to the next step in the process. In this case, it'll go to the marketing team. And then they're going to, oh, here, I need this soon. And then it's going to show up. It's going to be an email to their inbox where someone in the right role is going to get that kind of information. They're going to come into Samarkey then to take a look at it and say, hey, look, here's this pending request. Hey, who's this? I can see that somebody on the team needs it more urgently than I do. Here's Robin from my team who did some of the same stuff. Hey, I need this one right now. And here in mine, I'll just go in. Traditionally, I wouldn't be able to have the role of both creating this thing and the marketing role of editing it. But here I've got myself assigned with all the access, right? So I can do it. Now I'm editing the same thing, but it's presenting in a different context. Like, hey, now there's more things that the marketing team is responsible for. Oh yeah, this thing's going to be 100% cotton. And so there's certain things that I'm responsible for. I'm going to go in and say, oh, now I've got the images and things like that. Like, hey, what are these? These are pants. So we're going to bring up the correct image to be associated with this one. Or even here, let's finish off with sort of cheating. Like I've seeded ours with a not safe for work kind of picture where it's, hey, this is a sculpture from Michelangelo, but when we put this in, we're going to get tagged by we're using an external service here from Amazon called Recognition to parse the images, decide if it's appropriate. In this case, it's getting some warnings. And so you've got this sort of thing to make it easier for the data steward to take full advantage of other services, this machine learning and AI kind of thing. And here we'll be warned, like, hey, this is no good. You've got to, you're going to have to fix it. My demo world, I'm letting people skip warnings, but that might be appropriate to have it actually as a blocking data quality warning in other cases. Okay, and the process will continue. I'll be responsible for care instructions and et cetera. And if I had created new shoes or some other product, I'd get different attributes available to me. Hey, so with that, I am pretty soundly over my allocated time for demo. So I'm going to stop here and open it up to some of the questions. I think, Sterling, if you're going to walk us through some of the questions we've had, I'll mute and let you get on with that.
Thank you, Matt. We'll keep you talking here for a couple more questions, but definitely appreciate the demo. Thanks very much. Some of the questions, we've got a few here, and we only have a few minutes, so we'll probably need to get through these fairly quickly. We have first question is Samarkey a software as a service, a SaaS offering, and what are the options for being engaged with Samarkey's product? Need you back, Matt. You're on mute.
Hey, thank you. I was given a clever answer, but only to myself. Hey, no, that is a good question because I didn't mention that at all. The quick answer is it's what we saw here is not software as a service, but is rather offered as think of it as traditional software. It could be installed on premises, or it's certainly very cloud friendly. There's offerings on Amazon and Azure, and then some of our partners do offer it in a managed software as a service way. So for folks that want it, it's possible, but strictly speaking, we're delivering the software that folks will install themselves.
That's great. Thanks. Next question. Does Semarkey do artificial intelligence?
Right. And this probably came in especially because I was showing that connection to another one. And this is one that I like to be really clear about. The tool itself doesn't embed artificial intelligence, right? We see Semarkey's place as, our core benefit is this data management platform. So we do everything that can be done around that. And then things like the machine learning, the AI, we take advantage of partners for that. So the example we saw was calling out to Amazon recognition. And we have all sorts of examples of other versions that customers are doing, like calling out to translation services or other ones. So we're super friendly with that AI and ML world, and we have folks doing that. But it's not our technology. We're just making it an integration point for the others.
Great. We've got a couple new questions popping in here. Let me quickly look. Let's see. What is the difference between old Data Hub, kind of harmonized data lake, and the Data Hub you are presenting here? And where does it fit with the data lake, data warehouse, and data lakehouse? Tough one. Hey. And actually, let me sort of check. Is that more for Kevin or is that more for me to talk a little about that? Oh,
yeah, Matt, I'm happy to chime in. I think the goal is to understand if you have an XDM data hub, how do you layer it in? Where's the data? Is it in the data lake next to it? Is it in the database, or is it in Semarkey?
Yeah, fair point. It's a good way to think about it. And so I'm afraid, in one sense, I'm all back on the old "it depends," but hopefully in a good way.
I thought it might.
Yeah, and so in some cases, it's really going to be we're like, hey, you may have a pretty traditional data warehouse, and from an MDM standpoint, it's really an analytic kind of a use case. And so in this case, I would say they set pretty separately. Like there's the data hub where we're going to master some data, and that's going to feed into the warehouse. The data lake may be feeding straight into the warehouse, or maybe queried directly, and it's going to take advantage of what's in the hub to inform the data there. And so that can be a clean answer in some cases, but other times it's more of an operational use case, and the line will be a little bit different. So I'll stand by that as being a good example where they may be relatively separate, but it's not a definitive answer because it'll depend on cases where you want to integrate a little bit differently.
All right. Kevin, did you feel you got a good swing at this? Because they were asking specifically for your point of view.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. So I agree. It'll depend on the installation or the implementation solution and so forth. But I think that what increasingly we see is that organizations will try to get as much data as they can into sort of a consolidated data lake, because that's a very cheap way to handle it, and then create abstracted views on top of that so that you could have an XDM type solution draw from it and create that abstracted view, or you could have other types of solutions do it as well. So that's a common scenario that I see with this type of solution in general, that it oftentimes a lot of it lands in the data lake, and then it's just a question of how frequently you're reusing something in order to leverage an abstracted view. Matt can keep me honest as it relates to XDM in particular.
Yeah, I'd agree with your points, Kevin. And so often it's a relatively small structured set of data out of the data lake into the hub, the things that really get curated there, and then those will be fed back into the BI analysts who want to use that data, maybe to get a clean product list to do their analysis, and then wade back into the lake that's got less structured data and higher volumes.
Right, that's great. I think, unfortunately, we are out of time for today, but I do want to say a big thank you to all of you for attending the webinar. A big thank you to Kevin and to Matt for presenting all this great information. We certainly hope you're all safe and well where you are, and we hope you'll tune in again soon. We do have a webinar coming up, I believe on the 14th, October 14th. That will be about the data divide between data leaders and data laggards, and how to cross the divide. So we hope you'll tune in back again for our future upcoming webinars. Thanks very much, everyone, and we hope you enjoy the rest